Just give it another minute as people cross over. I think we're ready to go. So thank you everybody for joining us today for this session. Louise wants to start the slides. There we go, lovely. So your team today is myself, Alex Ridley. I'm the Organisational Culture Lead at the University Hospitals of Northamptonshire, and I'm being supported by Louise Bennett, who's our OD administrator and, has to be said, the chief organiser behind this week's amazing activities. Thanks, Louise. So just some housekeeping before we start. Sorry, if we could leave your cameras on so that we can interact with people throughout the session. And we have muted mics so that we can reduce the background noise in the recordings, but we will enable them at the end for a question and answer section. If you do wish to ask any questions during the session, then please pop them in the chat box, and we'll also give the opportunity to raise your hand at the end of the session and ask a question. As I've mentioned, we are recording today's session for our colleagues to catch up on. If you require an audio transcription, this is available for colleagues by clicking on the 3 dots at the top of the screen. And we would encourage you to use the chat function, as I've said, for all comments and questions throughout the session, but please be reminded to remain respectful and kind to colleagues at all times. So I thank you for joining us for today's session, as we're welcoming Robert to share his lived experience with mental health. Before we start, colleagues need to be aware that today's session is a real-life account of Robert's journey, and we'd remind you to be kind. Please be aware that today's discussion may contain conversations around mental health breakdowns, self-harm and suicide. Should you find any of this difficult to listen to and need to drop off the call, please do so. And we've just shared some details of help services in the chat now, so if you find anything triggering, please do reach out. I'll hand you over to Dave, who's going to be leading today's session with Robert.
Thank you very much, Alex. Really great intro and really good important topic to discuss, but also with those notices and lines and numbers, everything in the chat box that's already there as well. And if at any point throughout this session you think, oh, it's not for me, it's not just about bringing those numbers, it's okay to reach out to a member of our team as well and say, can someone please have a chat with me or contact me, etc. Safety is the most important thing. So my name is Dave Harrison, and Robert will introduce himself in a second. So Robert is my boss, he's also my colleague, he's also a friend, and everything else that comes under that, but I generally do what he tells me to do. And I've known Robert now for 5.5 years. So me and Robert have had discussions about what we're going to discuss, so we know what we want to talk about and also what the sort of barrier of safety is. So we have prepped this, we have made sure that we're happy to discuss what we're happy to discuss. So that's really important. My background is predominantly military, where I spent a long time in mental health training. So in a product called TRIM, Trauma Risk Management, which I've been doing since 2007, which is a peer delivered strategy. And I believe in peer delivered because that's allowing you to talk to someone who you know. I'm also the mental health first aid instructor, as well as one of my colleagues within NHFT as well. But I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a clinician, and we're not here to do that. So that's enough about me. Robert, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into it?
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Dave. So hi everyone, my name is Robert Freund. I'm the head of learning development at NHFT. I've worked for the trust for, this will be my 25th year. Doesn't feel like 25 years, but it has flown by. And as Dave said, this, and as Alex said, this is my story, it's my journey. Some of it is raw, some of it I've not really spoken widely about it. So I suppose it's just bear with me as well, because I don't know how it will be for me sharing some of the stuff, but it's important that I do share because it's such an important message. So yeah.
No, great. Okay, Robert. And I think what Robert says there, you know, it's about an important topic, because actually this is us. We work here. This is, you know, these people, me, Robert, everyone else, particularly men. We're really rubbish at talking about mental health. We're rubbish at doing physical health. We generally cancel a GP appointment, let alone, you know, put a hand up and go, oh yeah, we've heard the hashtag line, it's okay not to be okay. but we're still not great at asking for help. And we've had a lot of stuff this week: meditation, resilience, organizational trauma. We had the Paul Merson talking about mental health. We had financial anxiety. We've had chime. We've had burnout. We've had all this stuff. But this is now us. This is us looking inwards for a change and looking at what that looks like. So we're going to explore Robert's journey before, during, and after. So what was going on before, what was going on during, and how are things now? And like I said, we want to make sure that we do this in the safest way possible. So Robert, what I'd like us to discuss and share and have a conversation about is, and it can be any sort of timeline you want, but before you noticed things were starting to go a bit downhill, what was things like at home, health, social, work? What was it like for you?
Yeah, great. So I'd suppose to say 18, 24 months ago, say life was good. You know, as a family, we had ups and downs, which most families have, don't they? So, you know, I was able to work through those. It wasn't a problem at all. Work was good. I enjoyed the challenge of working with a great team. I was in an acting up role and then was interviewed for the substantive post, which I got, and I was really felt great about that. It was, you know, really amazing opportunity, and working within the trust as well. Family life, like I say, it was really, really good. We enjoyed days out, spending time together as a family, you know, holidays at the coast. And people who really know me know that I love Christmas. And that was one of the things which I can start talking about in January or Boxing Day, really,
all
next year. Yeah, definitely all year. And friends who really know me know that I have a small circle of trusted friends who I would confide in. And so I said life was good. It was all okay.
And so on that sort of journey then, things are good at home, work, health, social, and you'd also trained to be a mental health first aider.
Yeah.
So, you know, we know what we know, but do we do what we should do? So what did you notice? Sort of maybe, what did you see any signs, symptoms, telltale little things? What did you notice starting to almost pull the jigsaw apart, if you like?
Yeah, no, I think it's where it might be useful if I share like those life events as well, what got to that point as to when I really started to notice that I was feeling different and my moods were changing. Obviously, you know, in the sense of protecting people within my life events, I'm not naming the people in this, but, you know, my daughter, she became very poorly with mental health, with depression and anxiety. She had dysregulated eating, so she was restricting all food and fluid, refusing to eat at all with so much encouragement. It wasn't, and that resulted in numerous hospital admissions where she had to be tube fed, which in turn left to lengthy stays in hospital where either myself or my wife would be staying with our daughter. So it was tough, and especially not just on us and also for our daughter, but also for our other children at home who were witnessing, seeing what was happening. They were concerned. You know, a number of occasions we had to call 999, an ambulance come because her body was shutting down. She was also self-harming at this point, and that was on her arms and her body, and that was, she was hiding that, and it wasn't until we had the first episode of her collapsing that we discovered all of the self-harm. She'd also had 2 attempts to take her life by taking an overdose, so that was really, really scary. What could we have done? What did we not see? What's happening? So it was a really, really scary time. Obviously work were aware that was happening. I was sharing what was going on, so it was that working flexibly and bits, and then it's a bit like, and there was bereavement. So my dad passed away, and that was not long after a couple of the hospital admissions for my daughter. You know, we were estranged. We hadn't spoken to each other for 9 years, and he actually tried to reach out to me through a family member before he died, to say that he wanted to see me to make amends, just to have conversations. And unfortunately, before I had made that decision to meet with him, he passed away suddenly. No one, although they knew that he was going to die, not as quick as it did. So I was then dealing with a lot of guilt and regret as to why didn't I go sooner. All of that was just going on and round in my head. So it was really difficult.
Yeah.
In amongst all of this as well, we were then faced with a forced house move. So we were in a long-term rental, and we'd rented the property for several years. And it was always with the intention that it was for as long as we needed it, because it was a friend of us who was renting us the property. They were selling it and decided, you know, that we had to move. So we were served with Section 21.
And what period of time was that, Robert? What part of the year was that?
This is all within 6 months of each other.
Yeah.
So it was just like a catalyst of probably, it was just spiraling at this point. And we were struggling to find somewhere to live. You know, there was 8 of us, family of 8, and within our budget the properties weren't available. So it was really worrying as to what was going to happen. What happens if we don't find somewhere to live? So you can imagine the relationships got, you know, really fraught. It was being pulled in different directions. We were also working with professionals for my daughter because things weren't going right. Our voices weren't being heard. So sometimes it felt really challenging, that we were pushing water up a hill type of thing. And people will say, you can't write this. And I'll tell you, it felt like a scene from EastEnders, you know, that duff, duff, duffer at the end. That is how all of this was starting to feel. It was just so fast and it felt relentless.
I remember we had a conversation before the house part, and we were sat, and I think it might have been in Newland House, and I went, is there anything more that can happen, Robert? And you went, I don't know, I don't think there can. And it was like this, as you said, that theme tune almost like was going dum dum dum. And what was it when that house part came in? What part of the year was that? Well, it was near Christmas, wasn't it?
So that was in like the late September, September time. Yeah, so that was a lot of, and that came out of the blue as well. The house move, we weren't expecting that. It just happened. They spoke to us the night before to say we're going to consider him moving, selling the house, and the estate agents come in the next day, and we're like, that was, you know, we would have to been out by Christmas. So that just caused lots of anxiety.
And was the whole family knowing what was going on?
Yeah.
Young children, etc.
Yeah, they were, because we were very honest with them about what was happening. They could obviously see that we were upset and stuff was starting to be packed up and stuff. So for them, that also created lots of anxiety. Where are we going to live? What about my friends? What about school? And for me, it was like I was trying to hold all of that. I was trying to contain it and trying to be supportive, and then bottling it all up and thinking, well, I don't want to share my burden of what I'm thinking with other people. So I just kept that. And
I think it's important, Robert, to mention here that because I know you and I work with you, while all that was going on, you were still going, how are you, Dave? How are things at your house? How are you? colleague, how are you, colleague? Oh, there's one-to-ones to be done, and it all starts with, how are you? Are you okay? You know, and it was, you were still giving and giving to everyone else, and that, you know, we must never forget that. You know, that you were still doing this, and you had the analogy, if you like, of all them plates were spinning at home. You were but you were also doing that at work. You know, you had all that there. You had all these ones at work. You had your health going on. You had the social environment, and you were doing all this, but yet you were still going there. So when you started to, as you said, start to notice these things, and it was going, I'm trying to hold it together. And I know we had a couple of conversations, and you know, I saw other people having conversations. Was there any barriers or any thoughts that you didn't go, stop, I need some help from home, work, or what was that like? What was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I felt I couldn't ask for help, and this is what I'm. So there's this piece where I would confide in people who were close. I'm not very open in sharing, or wasn't very open. So now I am. It's important to share, but I wouldn't share how I was feeling or asking for help. My own internal voice was saying, you know, this is a sign of weakness. What are people going to say about you? What are people going to think about you? You can't go sick. Don't show that side. And that's what held me back from doing it. Although I was also focusing so much on the negatives, they were spiraling out of control at this point. And it was like, in my head, I was trying to rationalize with it and going, Robert, you teach this. You know about the circle of control, you know, and influence. Why am I focusing on all this negativity? But I just couldn't get past that, and that just then fed into how I was feeling. Well, you're a failure. You can't manage that. You're telling other people how to do it, but you're not even doing it yourself. You know, and I threw myself into work, and work was my life. It was all what I talked about, and this is stuff that I've talked about with family afterwards and friends. It was work. How was your day? So I'd be talking about what my day had been like, what had been the challenges, what was I thinking. I'd put my laptop into sleep mode, so it was never been switched off. I'd check my emails before going to bed. I'd start work early, and that's more from the working remotely. There's not a journey to work, so it was straight downstairs, straight onto the laptop. I'd be finishing later as well. It even got to a point where I did start creeping downstairs and looking in the night because I wasn't sleeping. And you know, I just fixated on particular tasks as well. So it got to a point where I was then procrastinating. I'd do the smaller tasks, but not the big ones. And then it'd be, oh my gosh, I've got to do this, which is completely against how I normally work. So that to me was the signs that I could tell something wasn't going quite right. And whilst people had known about the life events and what was going on, I didn't speak openly about my feelings and how I was coping. So, and this because, you know, like you said, when you've asked me or when other people have asked me, it's, how are you? And I've gone, yeah, I'm okay. Some people just take that. Others like yourself will go, how are you really? How are you really today? And if I'm honest, and this is the bit, is I would say I'm okay. I'm taking time for myself. I know what I need to be doing. But in reality, what they were just lies. And that was my thought process around that was, I can make my time. I can do this, but I never did. I was just saying, it was just words. It wasn't action. There was no action there.
And
So,
why do you think that was, Robert? Who are you? Why were you saying that? Because you said there that you knew, but you were just saying it. Why do you think that was?
Yeah, and I think that to take the spotlight off of me. So if I've said that, then people will be directed else. We won't carry on with that conversation. We'll move into work conversation or something else. And I think that is the thing. It's not been, as I've never really been open around how things make me feel. So it was always a challenge. So I'd always avoid that. And it would be, what can I do to get out of that particular situation? And that was by saying, I'm doing this. I knew what to say, basically what would be enough. Yeah.
And you knew what those coping mechanisms should have been. So what, and only share what you want to, what did you notice that you were doing unhealthy coping mechanisms?
Yeah. So leading up to the breakdown is obviously all of this was going on. The thoughts were just spiraling in my head, and there was like drinking. So I wouldn't very often drink. And if I did, it would be an odd cider or something. And actually what happened was I was drinking whatever was in the house. So there was wine, so a bottle a night. Then it moved on to gin. And that was a drink then that was every night, and more than one drink, and they weren't always singles. It might have been doubles or triples. It got to the point where I was just pouring it into the thing, and that isn't, I look back on that now and it's like, oh my gosh. And whilst I might have been posting things on social media in the sense of like, oh cheers, here's a gin tonight, or well, which one shall I buy, bottles and like that, I was also sharing, like I found social media was my outlet at that point, and I'd see these memes coming in or quotes, and I was like, oh, that really resonates with me. And they were really dark, or things where people would go, oh, what's wrong with Robert? What's going on? But I saw those as I could relate to them, so I was posting them or I was commenting on them and stuff. And yeah, so there was a lot of unhealthy stuff around that. I think as well, it's important to say that, when that breaking point it come hard. And I can remember it now. It was, it was in October, and I just broke, it snapped, everything that just come crashing down around me. And, it was a Friday afternoon. I'd just been in a Teams call and having a break before going back into another one. And we'd just received some news about the house to say that obviously the council, because we were seeking all avenues as to how we could get support, were very clear that they couldn't support us until we had actually been evicted. And
I remember you saying
that was like, I just couldn't believe it, because that was, you've served the Section 21, then it has to go to court, then there's got to be bailiffs and all I was thinking was, oh my god, what do the family think, what are people going to think, and all of it, and it just got too much. And I remember everything that I'd been holding on to for that last 6 to 9 months just come in that moment, and it just come blurting out, and I just couldn't control it. It was, it was there was a sense of relief that it was coming, but at the time it was so, I mean, I've never cried so much, and it was that just couldn't do anything. They were shouting, crying, and then obviously I'd been having dark thoughts already, but these at this point were just then spiraling, and all I was thinking about is, I can't do this now. I just want to end everything. Everyone would be so much better if I wasn't here, and that's what my head was.
So as a man, Robert, at that point, and like I said, let's only talk about what we want to talk about. As a man, when it came to that breaking point, and you couldn't see that future, do you remember what your thoughts were about what that? I know we're going into the, you know, the thoughts around suicide and the conversation around suicide, but as a man, what was that feeling? What was that emotion? If you only if you want to share it.
Yeah. A lot of it, there was shame and embarrassment. I felt really embarrassed, and although the breakdown that I had at that point was only witnessed by my wife, I felt awful afterwards, and even during that bit, because I couldn't control it. I just couldn't stop it, and no matter how much support or reassurance my wife was giving me, it just wasn't enough at that point. And it was like I just wanted to be left alone. I just couldn't rationalize with what she was trying to say, because all what was going in my head was, you know what you got to do, you know what you got to do. And I'd already had it planned, you know, leading up to this. I was already having those thoughts. I knew how I was going to do it. I knew what I needed, and I'd got all of that ready. You know, letters were written as well, so I'd got everything in place, and I knew when and where I was going to do that. But there was that one flick of a moment where it was, who's going to find you? How are your children going to feel? And that just said, boom, like it didn't take the thought away, but the intent to go and do it wasn't there. And some days got stronger than others. You know, the thoughts were there, they were constantly there, and it was really difficult trying to.
And were you drinking more at that point as well? Because I know when I was at my we're going back to 2008, when I was at the same sort of place of I had my plan ready, I had everything else. I just felt like a burden, like I was really in the way. And one thing that numbed that thought was alcohol. And the day when I was going to do mine was I couldn't actually get my alcohol for some reason, divine intervention, whatever. The shop was closed, and that was the day I sort of reached out for help at that point. But how would you describe, if you were talking to a group of men now, how would you describe that dark moment? What were you hanging on to? What was that glimmer of hope? But also, how would you describe it so other men that are listening to this might go, I think I'm getting to that point?
Yeah, I think there was a point where it's just so overwhelming. It felt like I was being crushed. I couldn't see the light at the end of that tunnel. I went in those deep moments in there, and it was just that the only thing that's going to give me that relief and peace of mind is to take my own life. And as I was having those thoughts and trying to go through everything, and it was, okay, if one of the children found you, what was that? And that made me feel really upset that I could do something that would have a lasting impact on them and their lives, and I didn't want that for them. And I think that's the bit where it flicked to say, okay, I've got the thought, and I've got everything there to do it, but I'm not actually going to follow through with that.
And was there any sort of, besides yourself, your own emotions, was there any other barriers or boundaries that you thought, I don't want to ask for help? What was stopping you going? Because you know what you're meant to do. We all know what we're meant to do. What was those? And it could be home or work. It doesn't really matter, Robert. Only share what you want.
And I think a lot of that it goes back to what I'd said earlier as well, is my own thoughts around accessing support in a sense of failure. I'd have to tell people how I'd been feeling. And I hadn't even told my wife any of this up until that point when I broke, that I'd been having suicidal thoughts for a little while, that it was getting to that point. So it took a huge step to actually reach out, and the first book was with the GP, and no matter how hard it was to have that conversation, it was the right conversation, and it had to happen. The GP was really supportive, and obviously making sure that I'd got contact numbers and everything, asking had I got a plan, what was I intending to do, and stuff, and obviously prescribed medication, because at this point I was only sleeping for like 2-3 hours a night, and that would have been broken and disturbed, and I just couldn't switch off. So
and at that point, when you're in the GP, by the way, having that conversation, it's important that we must remember everything else is still going on around you. The house, the illness, the grief, the work. I know you were off work, but the work stuff would still be on your mind. All that is still going on. So what gave you that? I know you went to the GP. What was that? What started to change, Robert? What was next, should I say? What was next?
Yeah, I think it was that realization that this can't carry on. I can't, without help, get through this. And I think quite, after days of crying, not wanting to do I wasn't doing anything. I was hid away from the kids. They didn't even know for months that I was off work, because it was all a secret. I'd kept everything secret from them and stuff, although they're not, they picked up on stuff. But it was that point where it's for them and for my wife and for me, it was, I've got to do something. I've got to stop this cycle. And even it wasn't instant. It's not a switch that you can just turn on and off. And it's not like, even when I was seeking that support, that I stopped with the drinking and stuff, because I didn't. That carried on well into my time off. But as you said, that for me was my release as well. That was it. Blocked everything out, and I can't recall everything that happened in those first 3 months of being off. I know it was bad, and that's in my head, it's bad, but I can't recall what happened, what was said, what was going on. And now, having conversations, it's like, it must have been pretty scary for my family and people close by to me with some of the stuff that I had said or what I was doing. So I think that, it's like I said, with the social media, I look back on that now, because obviously some of that's all starting to come up on my timeline and stuff. And I'm going myself, and I'm looking at that, and I'm going, oh my God, what was you posting? What was that? What's that all about? But like I said, at that time, that's all I could relate to. It was only that. And there was a point when I was seeking the support, and this was a barrier for me, and this is around, so like the talking therapies or the therapies that are provided by NHFT. A barrier for me was, I work in that organisation, and it was like, I've worked in that organisation for, at that point, it was 24 years, and I was going, I know people know me, the role that I'm in, people will know me as well. And it's like, how am I going to have these conversations with people who know me? Although I know there's the confidentiality, and we've got, the boundaries and all of this that would set up, there's no judgment. But in my head, that I couldn't get past.
Yeah.
It took a while because it was very much, well, I'm telling you everything about me, everything that's going on in my life, how I feel, taking you to the darkest depths of my thoughts. And then in 6 months' time, I can be facilitating some training, that person's there. And that was difficult.
Yeah.
And I, as I say, I found it difficult anyway to talk and get help and talk about emotions. But that was a real challenge, and I'm not going to say it was easy, because it certainly wasn't. And we needed to really establish the ground rules and the boundaries within that, because
So did you want to feel safe in the fact that what you're going to say, because like you said, future looking, in 6 months you could be sat on a table with them all around the NSLT, or you could be facilitating training, or they're coming to you for advice. So what was there, that psychological safety bit as well as emotional?
And that had to be created, and it did. We had to build that rapport. We had to explain around that it is safe, and that obviously, like I said, nothing's going to be discussed, and I know nothing would be discussed, but it's just that processing that yourself. And it was really important to have that conversation. And I there's a bit where I'm now thinking and reflecting back on it, is actually should have happened before it got to that breaking point. And I think there's that piece around, actually we need to be talking more about how we're feeling and what's having an impact on us, and not feeling that we've got to be embarrassed. It's not anything to be ashamed of or anything. It happens to us all. It happens to us, and some people maybe more severe than others. I think it was just a really difficult time to get through some of this, and with the support, because it wasn't just support from like counselling services or from the GP, there was support from friends like yourself. We would have those regular catch-ups. You'd be checking in with me, how are things, and just saying, message me every day, tell me what you're going to do, something for you, what you're going to do.
I think I kicked you out your house at one point and made you walk to the gate or something. And if you don't message me, I'll drive over and drag you out the house.
And that is the thing, because at that point I had become that recluse. I wouldn't leave the house. And if I had to leave the house, it would be at those times where I knew it was quieter. So there wasn't that chance of bumping into someone who I'd know. And if I did see someone, I would go out of my way to avoid bumping into them, because there was that bit of, oh, I haven't seen you for ages. How are you feeling? How are you? And it'd be, oh, I'm off poorly. And so I didn't feel that I was able to, at that point, to have those types of conversations. I binge watched off Netflix. And when I say binge watch, it wasn't even watching, it was just noise. Because what that was doing, it was blocking out everything that was going on in my world, to think, oh, I could just have, but as soon as it would just keep coming and going, it was coming and going. There was no switch off from it. It was, and unfortunately, during my breakdown in the recovery, my daughter then took a natural overdose and was admitted to hospital, and it was quite a severe overdose that she took. And that to me was, I had mixed feelings around this, in the sense that there was guilt that I was poorly, I maybe didn't see the signs, I should have done more around that, so it was really difficult. But then there was a bit, the other side of me was that I was a failure, that I was a fraud, because there was this piece where I was thinking, okay, I've been having these suicidal thoughts. Okay, I've not acted on them, but my daughter has acted on that. So she's more poorly. And, you know, if I really am thinking it, why did you not do it? And that took a lot of unpicking and working through that. And I had open conversations with GP and counselling and occupational health around that, because from that set me back.
Yeah.
Because then there was that point of, well, I've got to do it. I've got to do it now. I need to do it now. And yes, it was really hard to work through that and support, be there, for my daughter as well, and for everyone else in the house. So it was.
I really appreciate the fact that you're sharing this, and I think, and I hope that people who are watching it and they're passing it on to their colleagues are able to share this, because we don't often hear it enough. We hear it from, we can have a celebrity, like I said at the start, and we see these adverts all the time, but actually, you are our colleague on here. We are all your colleagues. We all work in the same place, and no one is Superman or Superwoman. We're all vulnerable to something in our lives: homework, health, social. So just thinking, Robert, now you're getting what you sort of need, if you like. You've still got all this stuff going on. Those plates are still spinning, and it's now time to come back to work. So we're going to slightly move the story on to that point then.
Yeah.
Just describe what your faults were, what was your worries, concerns, what were the barriers when you knew I'm in work that day, and what does that look like?
Yeah, it got to a point where I knew that I was ready to come back. There was that sense of that I just needed to be doing something different. I was ready to come back. I was wanting to know what was happening and wanted to get involved with stuff. I'd had, obviously, during my period of absence, which was like for 6 months, I'd had regular catch-up meetings, checking in how I am, how was I doing. And over time, I started to initiate conversation around work in those catch-up calls, and like how the team were, what was happening, sharing bits of knowledge around some of the work streams that we were doing. Over time, they moved face to face, which was difficult in the sense of the first time, because this is then you're having a conversation on the phone with someone, but now I'm coming to actually see someone and talk about how am I feeling, and it's real because you're with a person.
And was that in work itself, in the building?
So there was somewhere we've met off-site, and then there was some on-site in the building, and that itself was that, oh gosh, I've got to go in, how am I gonna, what's it gonna be like? And there's that piece where I did come in one time into the office because we'd wanted to talk about some of the projects, and it was really daunting. It was really, and obviously you was there, and you just made that so much easier and broke the ice, sort of thing.
That's because I sat on your knee.
Yeah.
I gave you a big cuddle. I sat on your knee and stroked your hair. Not that you got a lot left.
What's left of it?
But I remember feeling nervous as well, going, what do I, I should know what to say, but I was like, what do I say? I haven't physically seen you. And I remember thinking, oh, how just, and in the end I just went, do you know what? Just be your stupid self and get on with it. But I also remember, because there was only meant to be me and you in there, and there was like 6 people that turned up, and I was like, oh my God. And then it was, how do we make sure that you're still okay, and how does this happen? So when you were coming back then, and you've got your check-ins, you now got that plan for the next 4 weeks, the next 6 weeks, whatever that looks like, what was working, and what wasn't working, and only share what you want to
Yeah,
as well. I don't want to highlight, you know, Dave, you were the problem, or Dave, you were the, it's not about that,
No.
but what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah, and that's really important, because I think there were reflections that I had on this as well, because it's managing your own expectations coming back to work, and also what is the expectations going to be put on me in what I need to do and by when. Whilst it was a phased return and we'd worked out all of what that would look like over a 4-week period, what the start time, what the finish times would be, I populated that into the calendars, you know, before I even returned to work. I remember I sent an email to all of the team and was very open around what had happened, and it was about, I wanted people to feel comfortable to ask me anything. I didn't want it where people were like, oh, what do I say? Do I say anything? Or so I put that all in place. Obviously met up with people beforehand, and I suppose for me it was that day one coming back, and it was, we all caught up on Teams.
Yeah.
And there's a piece there where it's like, gosh, you know, if we were doing this in person, there would have been, let's meet in the car park, let's go for a coffee, tea, drink, whatever beforehand, then we'll go in and meet everyone else and he'll chat. I don't think we'd really thought about how it was going to feel coming back and doing it on Teams. It was like click join and then boom, you're there and everyone's there, and it's like, okay, so who's going to say what? Or so I think that's one of the things is around, we need to be more considerate around, and I'm saying it was, you know, it was horrible, it wasn't horrible, it was just that bit of being uncomfortable.
It's like a spotlight, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, Teams is, we're all looking at each other now, and you know, you don't, I'm not particularly looking at you, but it feels like that. So you open it up to 12 people and it's hello. Actually, if you were going to work, like you said, it'd be, I'll see you in a minute, I'm off to the toilet. Oh, do you want a brew, Robert? And it's more of that, I would say, slow introduction, almost like taking a step before you go, should we all go in the same room? Whereas I think you're right, Teams is, you're on, perform for me, you know. So yeah, I get that.
And I think stuff like that, so I was trying to be boundaried as well, in the sense of coming back to work, I don't want to go back to where I was 6 months ago. So it's like, what am I going to do differently for myself as well, and to benefit me, but also to benefit the team, benefit everyone. So that was very much around breaks scheduled in and blocked out in my calendar. I have always said to people, are you taking your breaks? Are you doing it? Are you that? And it never felt as if I was doing that myself. So I've made sure that now they're all in my calendar. We've heard about this before, about filling the white space in calendars. I have a thing where if I see a white space, I've got to fill it. Why is it empty? But I've got to put something in there. So someone was to say to me, oh, can we have a conversation, and be like, oh yeah, I can do blah. And then I'll go, Robert, you've backed yourself up into all these meetings back to back. Where's the time to get a drink, go have lunch, go to the toilet? So now it's very much boundaried in, lunch breaks are scheduled in, and then as my diary is filling, I'm making sure that there's that break between the meetings, just so that okay, let me process what we've just talked about, what actions have I got to take, go and get a drink, come back and log on. I think being out of the organisation as well for like 6 months, one of my worries coming back, well, a couple of worries was, what have I going to have forgotten? What am I going to be doing? And then going, oh my gosh, what is the inbox going to be like? And there was over 4,000 emails in there, and it was a bit of, oh my gosh. And what my line manager said was, delete. You know, the stuff that's in there was dating back to when I first went off, and it would have been resolved. People would have known that I was off, and if it's important, they would have come back and stuff. So that was a bit of a relief to go, right, okay, I can just hit that delete all,
restart,
and restart. Yeah, and that was nice. And also to be kind to yourself.
okay,
You know, when you're coming back into the organisation, you're not going to know everything. Stuff's happened, stuff's changed. You've got to give yourself that time to re-establish in the organisation, reconnect with colleagues. And that's how my first week was pretty much set up. We'd had catch-ups put in as well. Was it successful? Yes and no. And that's being honest in the sense that, you know, some of it worked really well in the fact of catching up and having the support, but there was times when it didn't work so well and didn't have what I needed to support the team or to have conversations, to a point that it did result in me breaking down on a Teams call and having to just take that time away. So, you know, we're all human, and
I think at that point, Robert, was a big learning point for all of us on that call, of actually, you know, have we done, it's not about doing the right thing, it's actually what do we do going forward after this, because clearly something needs to change. We can't just expect people to come back to work after, it doesn't matter what the period of time is, and just go zero to hero, get on with it, and here's all that. And just because you're now back at that job, you know, crack on there. As you said, it's the element of understanding, but then going, okay, the plan needs to change. We haven't got the plan right, so let's get back and adapt that plan, be flexible with it. And would you say that that's something that you've learned from coming back, is don't just have a plan, be flexible with it, be adaptable, or whatever?
Yeah, and 100%, because, you know, with all the best plans in the world, it doesn't always work out, and you've got to be able to just pause and go, actually, this hasn't worked for me, or it's not working for me. What are we going to be able to do? There was bits where I felt quite constrained by the phased return, in the sense of like trying to meet people and catch back up, because they'd be available when I was not around. So it was really just working through all of that. But for me, even now, it is about setting those new habits, and it's going forward. And, you know, it's come a bit of a standing joke, because I do like to read. And people are worrying about what type of books I might be reading and stuff.
Change your books.
But no, it's
so moving into that space we are now, because I think we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, and at this point, Robert, do you want to open it up at the end for a couple of minutes to questions? For those people that are listening, if you've got a question, please put it in a chat box or interact with us at the end. So, and not just men here, this is for all of us across ICN, across the hospitals, across where we work. We know Angela Hillary, our CEO, talks about get away from the process and get into that compassionate lens. Do you think we've got work to do to be more compassionate to ourselves, but also, you know, it works both ways, doesn't it? Emotional intelligence and all that. Do you think we've got some work to do?
Yes, I think there is work to be done, especially around processes. How is that people focused, in the sense, and how we, like I said, put that compassionate lens on? So I think there is that piece around how the organisations can be more compassionate, and I think that is having those honest and conversations with the staff, hearing personal stories like this to just see, well, are we compassionate enough, or what do we need to do differently? I think for me personally, I need to be more compassionate to myself, and being kind to myself, because I will set expectations and those expectations could be too high. Well, they are too high, and I need to work on how I manage that and stuff. But that's about having open and honest conversations as well around what are my expectations, are they realistic, what's going to be due. But most importantly for me at this point going forward is taking that time for me. It's not being selfish, it's been making sure that it's something that I enjoy, it's something for me and something that's going to benefit me in the long run. So I do now log like some successes or stuff what I've been doing as well for myself, so that I can reflect back on if I'm feeling a bit, oh, today's not gone so well, but let's have a look what has gone well all for the rest of the week and stuff.
And self-care is not selfish, is it?
No.
And
no.
There was one thing I picked up this week, and I think it was from, might have been Deborah Searle or one of the speakers, and they talked about hope. So just before I show you a slide and all that kind of stuff, Robert, what's the future look like for you today?
Yeah, well, it's bright.
Nice.
It's bright. The sun is shining. At the start of this call, I felt a bit anxious around sharing my story. I didn't know how it was going to go, but I feel there's a sense of relief. I don't know. I feel okay. I feel good.
I think it's very powerful what you shared. And I think there's probably, and I'm sorry, I'm using the men thing. I'm sure there's men that will listen to this, or there's wives and partners and everything on this call now thinking about the men in their life and going, actually, how are we going to encourage men to, not think it's all on them and to ask for help? And what I'm going to share with you, Robert, we discussed this is before we open up any questions and also ask Louise if there's anything else, is just this slide here. We talk about this one, don't we? If we don't make time for our wellness, you'll be forced to take. What's your thoughts on that today?
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've seen that, we've talked about it so much, and I've always been a bit like, nah, that's not me. That's not me. It doesn't apply to me. And actually, it does. It can happen to anyone, and that is that piece of recovering from that is a lot harder. Coming back to get your wellness. So yeah, to me it is, you have definitely got to make sure that you are looking after yourself. It's not being selfish at all. Even
those little 5-minute breaks, that glass of water, that get away from your laptop, doesn't have to be the big 6K run in your spandex, does it? It's the small bits that get you there, those small goals. And I think for all of us on this call, we must remember that one of the quickest things, and we've heard it throughout the week, haven't we? One of the things that we start to do is sacrifice our time to fill it with another meeting, to fill it with another email, to fill it with something that is more important than us. And actually, we should be the most important thing in our being. And the bottom one, Robert, people will never, we love this one. We'll never forget how you made them feel. And I'm hoping from the conversation that you've shared today, that people will feel it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to do nothing about it. And they feel empowered to have a conversation. They feel empowered to challenge. They feel empowered to say no. They feel empowered to go, I need help. And hopefully not. If anything went downhill from here, Robert, what would you do?
Talk about it is my biggest thing now. Is I'm so much more open around how I'm feeling as well. Not even with my wife as well, because previously I've kept all of that. I wouldn't share stuff. So it is now. It's don't worry about it. It's have those conversations, seek the support. It may be hard to start with, and it is, but over time it does get easier, and then you do realise that as well, and can look back on and build the strength from that as well.
Brilliant. Robert, listen, honestly, I know that we were about 20 minutes before this going, what are we going to do? What's it going to be like? Oh my God. Actually, it's the most powerful thing I've heard this week. So thank you very much from here and everywhere else for sharing that. I'm sure people on the call have really appreciated it. So I'm just going to hand over to Louise just to see if there's anything in the chat box or anyone's got a hand up, and then for Louise to close it. But just please, if anyone has had any reactions, emotions, trigger reminders, anything, please reach out for help. And Robert, once again, thanks very much. Over to, sorry, Alex and Louise.
Yeah, sorry, you've got me. Thank you so much, Robert, for being so open and sharing your story with us. It was really something to listen to, and Dave for leading it so sensitively. I think there's a few points resonated with me in there in regards to, we do know what to do, but we just don't do it. And the whole how your work leaches into your home life, because we're now hybrid working, you're back to back because of Teams, there's no travel time anymore to get your space. And I think as managers, there's something to take away about how we're supporting people back into the workplace. You know, coming back into, like you say, 4,000 emails is not going to help people, is it really? So some really good points in there. We don't have any questions, but the chat box is full of positivity towards you, Robert, but also in regards to how you're helping break down sort of the stigmas around mental health. I thank you for that, and I join them all and echo in saying how pleased we are to have you back, and how great you are in the teams.
Thank you.
So we are on time. So just to close the session, would appreciate your feedback. As you know, feedback is a gift. We've got the QR code and a link will be going in the chat, and we use this to shape our future events. We've got the resources online with all of our sessions from this week pre-recorded, and we've got one left this week. So 15 minutes at 4:30 on volunteering for good mental health. Please have a look at booking on that and share the recorded sessions with your colleagues. Obviously, we've encouraged everyone to be social this week. So if you've got any comments over the weekend about what a fantastic week you've had, please do tweet, Instagram, Facebook. I'm sure there's probably something on Threads now as well, but I wouldn't know how to use that. Hashtag VWBF23. We have shared the details if you have been affected by anything in this video. We've obviously put them back up again there on the slide, but please, you know, we can't stress enough how important it is to reach out if you need that help. So all that remains for me to do for the penultimate time this week is to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you're watching us on catch up, thank you for your time. Please encourage your colleagues to catch up on our events that we've had this week. Maybe you could take the time during a team meeting to watch a session. Thank you to everybody in health and social care across Northamptonshire for everything you do across our county. And a special thank you to our amazing Wellbeing Festival team for what has been an incredible week. Enjoy your Friday afternoon. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.